It's my great pleasure speaking. Maybe it was partly a response to the Minister's title under a panel called Beyond the Megaprojects. So we've been convinced by Treasury, stop asking for so much money, ask for littler stuff. So we'll ask for both. But to do that, we have Provocateur extraordinaire, Theo Psychogios, Deloitte's finest, to come up and join us. He's going to be, sadly, the return of the king, Ned Manoon, the Mayor of Liverpool's finally succumbed to the COVID bug. Wish he told me before I spent half of yesterday with him. I'm only back 3 days back out. I'm not going back in. Stuart McKenzie, pre-contracts boss of CPB. Matt Jordan, one of those aforementioned Australian institutional investors who wants new roads to open up some jobs. And Deputy Secretary with the most, Camilla from Transport New South Wales. Please welcome them all.
Well, it's been a long day, everyone, and we've still got a little bit of a stretch to go. As Chris just alluded to, there's been a lot of talk about the big projects, the spine, the skeleton that's been built around Western Sydney, and it's quite important as a foundation for we move forward. But we're here today in particular to start talking about how we put the meat on the bones, how you start to move beyond those mega projects, some of which might be about how you repackage and rethink about those mega projects, but in other regards, how you start to bring some humanity into the community, how you start to bring in the fabric that society wants. And we've got an eminent panel up here representing a range of perspectives, from investor to builder to essentially commissioner in that regard. So we're going to start with you, Camilla. During the lockdowns, the lack of public amenity was called out, in particularly around southwest Sydney. People didn't necessarily have parks, they didn't have other facilities. And there was a belief that it was too much of a fixation on all the really big shiny things, and then everyone turned their back and went away and there wasn't really anything else there. Do you think that's fair of what's happened historically, and how are things changing and moving forward in terms of perspective of placemaking and trying to put people at the centre of these communities?
Okay, well, there's quite a bit to say in response to that. In terms of sort of beyond the mega project, of course we're still doing mega projects, but we're doing them differently. And if we've spoken about the M12 today, but if you look at an example of, that's a $2 billion project, but we've broken it down into smaller packages, so 3 packages. But it's what that project delivers beyond the connectivity to the new Western Sydney Airport. You know, it does have adjacent to it the active transport link for cyclists and pedestrians. It has amazing recognition of country through its urban design and the art it would deliver. And it's also enabled the delivery of a sporting facility, so the BMX bike in the Western Parklands. So what we are seeing is our mega projects are being broken down into smaller packages. That's great for community, great for second and third tier contractors, but it's what they're also delivering beyond the sort of the connectivity. We're building more sporting facilities, more urban renewal revitalisation, great recognition of heritage and appreciation of heritage, but particularly recognition of country also in our projects. But it's that cycling infrastructure, open space, etc., that comes with mega projects. We're still doing plenty of small projects as well. And in fact, in that $76.7 billion, which is the transport pipeline for the next 4 years, which we announced in Western Sydney in July out at Rooty Hill, and we'll be updating that pipeline very shortly. But we did see a balancing in a portfolio away from those mega projects, so it's more balanced towards the smaller, less complex projects. Those projects do support community, but also a shift away from the centre of Sydney towards more outer metropolitan and regional projects as well. So look, we're very cognizant that our projects need to be more than just bridges and roads and cycleways and railway lines, etc. They've got to be for community. And it's very much why my division is called Infrastructure and Place, not just infrastructure. I think the other thing to say is, we've reflected on what the pandemic has meant to communities, but also the market we're in at the moment. And we've realised that we need to do something different. So we recently issued the Future Transport Strategy, and that was very much in response to the sorts of dynamics we're seeing in the community and the environment at the moment. And again, it's all about putting communities at the centre and then building infrastructure and connectivity around that.
So one of the things that I've observed, particularly as it comes to community, smaller infrastructure, is often there's a debate over who's responsible. Who's responsible for building it, or who's going to be responsible for maintaining it and moving forward? And I understand that's natural with 3 tiers of government and private sector involvement. Are you feeling that there's greater collaboration and clarity emerging, and particularly in Western Sydney, around how some of those old battlegrounds are now firming up, so that what's more important is identifying the projects we want to get done and less about who is going to carry the can for that now or into the future? Because I could see how that could be a never-ending cycle of us getting anything.
Look, I think it starts with a document like the Future Transport Strategy. So it's very clear to everyone in the community, whether it's a local government, whether it's the federal government, whether it's contractors, communities, future workforces, what we're planning to achieve. They can therefore plan and mobilise for that. And the thing that couples with that is our pipeline. The fact that we are now putting out every 6 months that forward pipeline, so people have clarity. We're even putting projects in there that aren't, 100% funded, but at least everyone in community and industry can see where we're trying to head, and therefore give us their commentary. Tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. We're always open to feedback. And then collectively as a community of industry, all tiers of government and government, we can work to get the outcomes that community needs. So it starts with that long-term vision, that pipeline, and an openness to engagement with all parts of industry and community. Excellent.
Matt, you're an organisation that throws some money on the table. You build the odd thing, generate the odd thing. What's your wish list? What are the things that are most important for you and your organisation to be able to support job creation around? Is it amenity? Is it connectivity? Are there particular areas that are low-hanging fruit where you feel is a no-brainer, where we should be really prioritising in the next couple of years?
It's a good question. GPT does develop in the retail, office and logistics sectors. In the logistics sector, we're seeing record low vacancy in Western Sydney and occupiers screaming for space. That comes with developers shovel ready, ready to go, the lack of land available for development, and a delay in the planning pathway, coordination between agencies, and I guess that ultimate infrastructure that's required to deliver that industrial land ready for development. Without this, and having the outcomes that we need, we'll continue to see occupiers relocate to other states and the loss of jobs and investment in Western Sydney, and we want to keep that in the Boomtown. There's been a bit of talk about Mamma Road Precinct over the day, and that is part of the answer to that logistics and that record low vacancy and the occupiers staying in New South Wales and Western Sydney moreover. So the precinct needs upgrades, road upgrades. Stage 2 of the Mamma Road upgrade, connecting to Elizabeth Drive, is a really good example of that and a logical next step for that upgrade to occur to connect Mamma Road Precinct to the airport, the new airport, and create that connectivity. It should be a promise for both political parties in the next election. What can we do as industry? We've opened the invitation to agencies and willing to deliver what we can and really help that process. Industry and GPT and the like can procure things maybe a little easier than agencies, and we'll do that in complete coordination with Transport New South Wales and others. A good example of that is we're working with Sydney Water at the moment in creating a temporary wastewater solution until the ultimate wastewater solution comes into place in 2025. So that will create us to deliver a warehouse and have occupiers and jobs in the precinct before the ultimate solution in 2025. So they're the examples that, and just the working relationship really, and the partnership and the invitation that we want to give.
So I'm going to come to you in just one sec, Stuart. So, Matt, it's been put to me that developers, in some regards, are necessary evil, all right? And that they'll only dip into their own pocket if it's only in their own wealth and return interest, and that a lot of the things that are being asked for in terms of community infrastructure or parks and open space don't always naturally create value there. Now, is that a fair statement, or are people missing the value that creates for your assets?
Well, I think I mentioned the key one there, and we don't want to lose occupiers and investment to other states, and that is occurring to Victoria and Queensland. So I think that's an obvious one where we can create an outcome in Western Sydney to keep the occupiers in Western Sydney. It'll benefit GPT, but overall it'll benefit the state. And that's a direct outcome for the state. And we talk about a Western Sydney city and jobs being close to homes. We want to create that. The Mamma Road precinct has the ability to deliver 17,000 jobs once it's fully developed. So they're the things that we look at. Gets me going to work and delivered outcomes to Western Sydney.
Excellent. So we know Western Sydney is a vast area. It's huge. So good luck, Camilla, with all that connections that's going on. It's massive. Stuart, the more smaller projects we get, they're still going to accumulate to be a large number of projects and they're still going to be worth a lot of money. Do we have the bandwidth to actually produce all this amenity and all these other smaller projects in the time that the hungry Christopher Brown would like in doing that? Or is there capability and capacity building and greater collaboration that's needed if we're genuinely going to up the ante and accelerate rollout?
Yeah, look, I think in that respect, I mean, what the mega projects do, and which is for CPB, where we're involved in Western Sydney Airport, we're involved in M12, we're building Western Sydney Metro, and part of those projects is to leave a legacy. For us, it's not just about building a piece of infrastructure, walking away, hopefully making some money. I mean, it's more about, that's part of it. That's the underlying thing of every contractor. But, when we build these projects, we're really now focused on the legacy we can leave in the areas we work in, So whether it's training, whether it's, the employment opportunities we provide. I mean, a mega project really, it's not like CPB comes into Western Sydney with its own workforce and just builds something, We on our current projects in Western Sydney, 70% of our workforce on average is from Western Sydney itself. There's a huge amount of our workforce, and then in even our subcontract workforce, it's even larger. So, our projects, while they might be, $1 billion or $3 billion projects, they're really just a series of $50 million projects all over the place, And we've found with that we just have to have qualified people. And the only way we can do that is to actively go out there and train people ourselves. So in about 2016, we developed a training centre in Homebush, which we trained all our people in. We've now got other industry, partners doing the same thing with us now through that facility. And we've now taken it one step further with Western Sydney University and TAFE to now create an applied technology and construction course that allows people to get trained in construction and have that underlying skill set. So we see that the more we can do that, partner with local companies. I mean, on the Western Sydney Metro, our local joint venture partner is made up of three, quite prominent businesses in the Penrith area, in Mulgoa Quarries, J.K. Williams, and what's the third one? Sorry, I was just thinking. Sorry, but we're partnering with local businesses. Burton Civil. Sorry, I apologise, Burton Civil. We're trying to bring up those smaller businesses so that when we get to that next pipeline of work, they've got the skill set to work in that next level construction to sort of keep the legacy going.
So Camilla's talked about, in some regards, chunking down projects and reprogramming them into smaller chunks and possibly within those areas expanding out their impact in what they do and bringing in more public realm or other aspects that might be part of it. Is that a natural move for you and your subcontractors to be able to almost move horizontally and add some of those elements rather than just do more of the same?
It's an interesting thing because, when I first started in construction, most of our projects were small projects, and my first project was a project in the Blue Mountains where it was myself, an engineer and a surveyor. And so for us, actually, as even a big company, we like to work with, in those smaller projects often because it gets our junior people that front end experience to go and run a project rather than be on this mega project where they may be just a cog in the wheel. So, it's that for us. We're quite happy to play in any of those spaces. But, I guess there's good and bad to both, because if you have lots of small projects, you've got to have lots of people to manage those smaller projects, and that sometimes can create some inefficiencies. But, it's a natural progression, I think. And it's the one good thing that's come about through this Western Sydney, model through the airport and the M12 and the like is, if you look at Northwest Sydney, my first project in construction was a job out at Rouse Hill, was a sewage treatment plant. When I went out there was just fields and nothing, and I was out there going, what the hell are we doing this for? You look forward to today, and that area is just bustling. And the one thing I think that's been well learned by the government is that if you can get ahead of the curve with the big projects, the smaller projects that then follow are much easier to implement. Whereas if you don't have those bigger projects and those bigger bits of infrastructure in place to start with, it's then very piecemeal about how you go about it later.
If I can also just add to that, I think regardless of the project size, there's still the Industry Skills Legacy Program, for example. So it still mandates how many learning workers, how many local workers, how many women, etc. So big or small, they're still complying with those requirements. So we're getting those great outcomes. And Stuart's right, we're seeing about 70% of our project workforces in Western Sydney come from Western Sydney. That's really important. And we're also seeing lots of learning workers. So Parramatta Light Rail, for example, 20% of the workforce is under 25. That's leaving that wonderful legacy of skills training, jobs, development, etc. locally.
Yeah, and we're also seeing, the one thing we're seeing a lot more of is a lot more women coming forward now in construction in Western Sydney. I was out on the M12 the other day, and all the big dump truck drivers were women on that job, and they're seeing the opportunities because, it's a well-paying industry, and if you can work close to home in a job like that, it's fantastic. It doesn't always just have to be engineers and the like. We need people at every level, and the more women, the more, when we've got Indigenous organisations we're working with out here in Western Sydney, the more we can get all those parts of the community to contribute, it just makes it so much more of a vibrant industry. And we need the skill sets. We just purely need them.
And in that regard, is that something that you and your industry colleagues set as targets yourself, or is it that you find that there's a working population in Western Sydney who see opportunities and aren't bounded by historical gender norms and going for those? Like, is there a difference between the market and the attitude of the people here going, I want to give that a crack?
I think there's just a change in attitude generally across our population, but we do find, we do actually have a very high percentage of women on our projects here. So on Nepean Hospital, we've got, I think, 26% of our workforce on that hospital is female. So, would I say it seems to be a bit more out here? Yeah, it does from what I've seen just anecdotally. But we set ourselves quite hard targets, year in, year out on all those things because like we see it as, again, a legacy builder. We don't want to just be sort of building things and leaving them. We want to train people, we want to get people involved and people that wouldn't normally be involved, and sort of wipe away those stereotypes, that can be seen with construction.
So we've talked a lot about the intersections of government and private sector working together and putting communities' voice first and delivering what is really needed. And previously the question was put to Minister Ward about how do we hear the voice of community? How do we keep on top of that pulse? Because it can change and it can consistently change. And the machinery of business and government isn't always as agile in that regard. So, and one of the points that's been raised here is about low carbon industry, and that's something that, particularly in New South Wales, is front of mind for people. The government's been very proactive in driving industries there. How do we both stay responsive to the evolving needs of our communities on short turnaround times often at time, in spite of long-term planning, but also take leadership in using these projects for what we think will be generational changes in what we want to achieve.
Okay, look, we're doing a lot at Transport for New South Wales. So you may not be aware, but the electrified rail network in Sydney is now zero emissions, as is the metro in Sydney. We're also doing the zero emission bus program. So we're going to replace every non-electric or non-hydrogen bus in the whole of the state. So that's 8,300 buses. There will be zero emissions. And in fact, we're well on that journey. We've recently let a contract for $70 million for 79 buses, and they're being built here in Western Sydney at Custom Denning. So we're doing lots with our operational emissions. The next big hurdle, of course, is what we build. But this year at Transport, we've kicked off our sustainable procurement industry initiative.
What and how? Like what materials and those sort of things as well?
So how do we head towards net zero emissions in the design and delivery of our projects? Because that's the big hurdle. That's hard. You know, there's not many alternatives to concrete, steel, etc. But how do we reuse more, recycle? But how do we actually reduce the volume of these materials that do generate those emissions? So we're doing lots of things in this space, and it tallies up with your other question, but we don't want to do it alone. There's no point me coming out and mandating what industry is going to do tomorrow if I haven't co-designed it with industry. We're aware of some fabulous best practice nationally, and globally. We want to harness that best practice, but we want to do it at scale so it becomes BAU on all our projects. So that's something that we've been doing very closely with industry. We put a position paper out in February, and since then we've been holding workshops with industry, both the consulting industry, because they drive the design, and that's where the real value can be generated, but also with our contractors to ensure how do we achieve that goal, but how do we do it with industry and not without them, and bring them on that journey. And look, there's some great outcomes on our projects. Parramatta Light Rail, Project 1, it recently achieved the highest rating ever from the Sustainability Council for its green track. So a great visual outcome, great amenity, but great greenhouse outcome too for Parramatta. So lots of things we're doing in this space. We're very cognizant with the level of investment that taxpayers, both state and federal, have invested with us. We need to be delivering more than just connectivity, and we need to be doing it environmentally sustainably, and hence why we're so committed to that initiative and that outcome.
So, you want to go?
So, and then, like, you know, from an industry side, I mean, obviously we work quite closely with government on those issues. Like, you know, Western Sydney Airport Metro Tunnel is net zero carbon job. At the end of the day, but also we always have to be, and as Camilla says with concrete and steel, obviously our biggest products. That's our biggest challenge. Obviously we use fuels and the like as well, but we're always looking to get ahead of the curve in that respect. So we're looking at low carbon steel, obviously. With concrete, we're working with concrete companies to look how we can fix that problem. It's an evolving and it's a quickly evolving area, but we're also looking at things like, portable solar panels for all our projects, all sorts of things. So we're always looking to sort of, get ahead of the curve, and we can do it quite quickly,
We really see this as a non-compete zone, like safety. So, if we can share information and data across industry and across government, if someone's got a great idea, let's leverage it and roll it out more broadly. But it should be a non-compete zone. This is the right thing to do for industry and government.
I think from a built product point of view, 32 Smith Street, which actually won an award last night, we and GPT as a group has a carbon neutral target, and obviously we'll bring that into our logistics portfolio as well. So as a group, we're absolutely focused on that as well.
So in the final minutes that we've got left, because Chris has clipped 5 minutes off us to get his schedule back on track, all of this stuff costs money. And last time I checked, we've raided the back of the sofa a few times, and we're pretty much only coming up with fluff these days, so we've got to find other ways of doing it. Minister Stokes has recently championed a white paper around business improvement districts and being able to put in place a mechanism where industry comes together, pays to play, where a majority of people want to do that in collaboration with government, in committing to levies that will then pay for targeted infrastructure and redirect their stuff there. Matt, is this pie in the sky, or is industry serious about being able to put its hand in its pocket and really wanting to drive these programs along and not just wait for government to do it?
We've somewhat done that in the I guess the structure plan for the DCP for Memo Road. We've developed a traffic model in conjunction with Transport New South Wales to do that, out of our pocket to do that, and moving forward, willing to help fund Memo Road upgrade and other upgrades within that precinct. So, and SIC will obviously be a function of that as well, and we're willing to help for sure.
And we've got one final question here, which leads to how we can use these projects and the industry and government to drive the social enterprise sector. So how do we start to get smaller businesses, whether they come out of Indigenous communities or migrant communities,